All right. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to another Future Focused Weekly Update. Hopefully, keeping you 10 steps ahead of what's happening at the intersection of business, technology, and human experience. I am dropping this episode a day early today because it's a holiday weekend and I don't know what my plans hold for Friday. And I figured, well, I might as well get this out because I know what my topics are this week. So, getting ahead of the game on this. Before I get into it, just a real quick plug. If you find these episodes helpful, if you would do me a huge favor and drop a review on it, share it with somebody you know. It just helps me get the message out there. And again, I feel a little like I need to go take a shower after doing that. But it really helps me, and I really do this for the benefit of others, but others won't know about it if they don't hear about it. So those kinds of things just help get the message out, and it would be a huge appreciation from me if you would do that. I'm not one to ask for help, but this is one area I know I can. Also, if you did not know, I have a Substack where I write about some of my biggest reflections on the topics I talk about each week. So that is christopherlind.substack.com. If you haven't checked that out, I would encourage you to do that as well. All right, enough of the plug for stuff that I need from you, and now get into the stuff that I'm hopefully giving back to you, hopefully helping you think through some of this stuff. So I've got 5 things on my list this week that we'll see how many of them I get through. I'm going to be watching time because some of these are bigger ones that I want to actually spend some time on. So I don't want to rush them. So if it gets long, I may bump some of these topics to a later episode, but we'll see. So the first one I'm going to jump into, let me actually make note of the time here. So the first one I want to jump into, I want to say it was Wednesday last week. Now, if you've been listening to my weekly updates for a while, you know I've been following what's been going on at the kind of intersection of this human embedded technology. There's a lot of stuff out there in terms of wearable tech. I mean, I've got one on my wrist right now and things like that. But then there's this next level of fully integrating tech into our bodies, which isn't necessarily new, but some of the new developments in 2024 have been these, neural chips. And Neuralink has successfully implanted one of these chips. And last week, they showed a video of one of the patients who is paralyzed, at least from what I can tell from the video, controlling a chessboard on his screen with, they call it the force, but really it's with his head, with his mind, with his thoughts. He's literally sitting there and he's thinking out his chess moves in this viral video of him talking through what he's doing. And again, it's to me a reflection on how quickly this stuff is moving and why I continue saying we are in for a very, very wild next few years as technology advances. But I think some of the things that came to mind, because I had mixed reactions. So just sharing where I was with this, as I watched the video and I watched this individual, I thought, how cool is this in some ways? In some ways, I just go, man, my heart goes out to this gentleman who I didn't take enough time to dig into his backstory and how he ended up in the situation he's in and all this, but clearly unable to play chess the way he was playing chess prior to this Neuralink chip. And now with this advancement in technology, he can, with his thoughts, control his moves on the chessboard. And I think about, having been around the funeral industry and kind of people in the late stages of their life, I've watched so many people who, our bodies get old, they break down, and the things we want to do, the things we'd like to do, we find ourselves being less and less able to do them. And so I think about this from a positive sense, and I go, this is pretty amazing to think of some of the ways that we might be able to change the trajectory and change the lives of people who have maybe suffered for years, decades, maybe their whole life. They've suffered and been unable to do certain things. And now by connecting them to a chip, they now, because they're cognitively still there, able to do things that they weren't physically able to do. And I think about how this could connect to, as we start thinking about, well, okay, if you can control a computer, that means you can control an artificial limb, you can control all these other things that you start to go, the possibilities really are potentially endless as we think about this stuff. And I think that's exciting. And I think there's some really exciting things about where this could go and how this could positively impact people's lives in really meaningful, valuable ways. So I want to make sure that's really clear, because that really was my initial reaction when I saw this. Was I just went, how cool is this? And I think about a similar moment that I had when I was in VR at a VR big event that I was participating and kind of helping host. And a gentleman who had no arms was at the event, and somebody was controlling his avatar. And at one point in the event, we gave him a high five, and he just got all choked up because he'd never experienced a high five before. And VR gave him the ability to experience a high five. And afterwards, he wanted to experience giving someone a hug. And so I think about these things that, if you're someone who has not suffered with a disability or had something like this in your life, you may not even think twice about the impact and the potential that this can have. And so on that round, I'm really excited and eager to see where this goes. At the same time, I continue struggling and wrestling with this a little bit, because I also know that people in those situations also tend to be extremely vulnerable to making decisions on the hope or the promise of what something could be, without necessarily being in the best position to consider all the risks and the implications of the things that they're doing. And I think about the way our system and the way things are designed to, in many ways, exploit that and to take advantage of that, and know that, hey, these people are desperate. It makes it a heck of a lot easier. Maybe we don't really know how this stuff works, but hey, better than where they are now. So what the heck, let's try it. And maybe some people get hurt, but it's better off than where they were before. And I'm not saying that's the attitude we should have. I'm saying that's the attitude that I often see with this. And it's one of the rising concerns I have as we think about some of this technology, because again, we're starting to mess with some things that, if you've studied medical advancements and you've studied any sort of advancements, people tend to get hurt in the process, and it never goes right. And this is just part of, and drawing the line between where is this just part of the process and where are we maybe being more reckless or more careless than we should, because, this group of people, their life really sucks anyway. And so if we can even potentially offer them something better, why not? And if it doesn't go well, and this attitude of not seeing the individuals who may get the biggest lift and may be the most to benefit from this as equals, and giving them the full consideration of how are we making sure that we're protecting them, and that they're informed of the risks, and that not just that they're informed, but we're also taking into account the vulnerable state they're in, and that in that vulnerable state, it may be a lot easier to make a decision you maybe wouldn't if you weren't in that position. And I don't have the answers to this at this point, but it's one of the concerns and the rising concerns I have as speed continues to pick up in this space. And we go, hey, great, look how well it went, right? And we see these highlight reels of, here's this individual who's disabled, completely unable to move, and here now they are able to control this stuff. And then what's the next step? And then what comes after that? And there's so much good that can come from it. But often what we won't hear, or often won't see until far later down the road, is what some of the negative sides of this were. Who are the patients that didn't have this success rate? Who are the people who ended up dying because, we didn't really take the time to test it? And I know if you listen to my episode a few weeks back talking about when Neuralink first was announcing this, they skipped some steps to get to this spot. And there tends to be there's a tendency to want to do this, to say, there's so much good, let's just charge forward with it. And I'm sure the good will outweigh the bad. And that's where I'm struggling right now with some of this. I saw this, I was excited. I went, wow, so much potential, but I can't help but go, what's on the other side of this? What might we not be seeing in the headlines? And how do we make sure that what's not being in the headlines is at least represented in the decisions, in the process, in the actions that we take, so that we aren't exploiting vulnerable people for the sake of progress? And now, to be fair, I think it's fantastic that where this is being focused right now is folks who really are in health. They're challenged. They have situations that this really offers them an opportunity that they maybe previously would not have had. And I think that's very encouraging. But I think we just need to be careful in this. And I also think, and this one just comes from my worldview standpoint, I am also very keen to the fact that there can be a sense that, if you're somebody who's disabled, or if you're somebody who's struggling with this, and you can get to this point where you go, well, now if I overcome that, then I will be satisfied, then I will be happy. And I have concerns that these promises that some of this technology are going to make, it's going to be writing checks it can't cash. And there are going to be people that get to the other side and even maybe go, well, now I'm able to do that, but it maybe didn't change my life the way I thought, or this void, this hole that I have still exists. And maybe it turns out this wasn't the thing that's just going to fix it all for me. And where does that leave someone then who goes, great, now this one thing that I thought was the barrier to everything is gone, and it's still not satisfying. And I think there's just a lot that I wrestle with and think through as I think about some of these advancements, and how far is too far. Where do we start crossing a line where, I know the natural next steps for some of this stuff is going to be, well, great, we can hook these people up to these chips. They can start doing these other things. Well, why not attach artificial intelligence to some of this? Maybe we can supersede somebody's mental capacity by augmenting it with artificial capacity. And the progress, the desire to just keep charging forward, I continue saying this in so much of my content, that we just need to slow down and think about some of this stuff a little bit and make sure we're accounting for. I'm not saying don't progress, don't continue moving forward, don't see how far we can go with some of this stuff for the benefit of people. But I think we need to do it thoughtfully and carefully and consider all angles of this, instead of just going, hey, this is fantastic. Look, this guy can control a chessboard. All the more reason, let's just throw all the resources at it, and let's do a media storm about how this is going to give people things that they never had access to before with zero consequences. And I feel like that's often how this stuff gets represented. And it just leaves people lacking. It's giving them salt water when they're really thirsty. And it's too early in the game for this. And that's the part that makes me a little bit nervous, is this stuff is charging forward like so many of these other technological advancements, that we end up going, have we taken the time and the consideration to, and you're going to hear about another one of these that's taking off like a rocket, that I'm going, and the data is already starting to come out about this. So I'm going to stop there. But again, excited to see where this goes. I'm going to be watching this very, very closely over the rest of the year to see where this merging of human and machine goes and how it continues to progress. Again, I'm at least encouraged at this point to see that where this is really starting to take off is really solving some real issues for people in meaningful and positive ways. And so I think at that point, I'm optimistic, while still balancing that alongside my heavy dose of, I'm not going to think it's all sunshine and puppies. Okay. So the second one, and based on the pace, I think I'm only going to hit 4 of my 5. So I'll push one to next week. But the other one that caught my attention, somebody sent this over to me, and it showed up in the LinkedIn news team sent it to me as well, that there's this big boom of workers who, if you're not familiar, recently there's been a lot of legislation around pay transparency. And I believe there are 10 states currently that require companies to share pay ranges for all their positions. So if you have a position, an open position, you have to actually say, this is how much the job pays, which I'll get into some of this because I'm in the HR space. I spend time around compensation, and I'm familiar with some of the complexities of this. So big surprise. Legislation comes out, says this is not right. Compensation should be free knowledge. Everyone should know what companies are paying people. simple solution. Let's just make transparency a thing. 10 states do this. Now, unintended consequences, workers are quitting in significant droves over what they're now finding out. And part of me just chuckles a little bit, not actually chuckles, but like literally goes, oh my gosh, like we take really, really complicated problems. We put it in the hands of people who don't actually even understand the problem. We ask them to make a decision about it. They make an oversimplified decision to solve it. And then we're shocked when the whole thing kind of falls in on itself. Now, let me just address the situation from both angles because I understand both sides of this. So, on the one end, I understand the desire from employees and workers to want greater pay transparency. And I'm also very intimately familiar of the sting that comes sometimes when you actually get it. So just one example specifically to my career. I remember the first time I took a manager role, or it was one of my early manager roles, and two of the people on my team made more money than I did. And that was like a hard life lesson in pay transparency, because all of a sudden, as the manager, I could see people's compensation and I now had to make decisions about the raises that these people were getting. And I'm looking at this going, these people that are working for me are making more money than me. And this makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable on this. I am also extremely sensitive and recognize how frustrating it is, because I've been there myself, how in many ways, companies are over here demanding employee loyalty and saying, we want loyalty. Employees need to be loyal to us and all this. And yet, if you're an employee who has stayed with the company for a long period of time, in many companies, I won't say all, but in many companies, you're probably vastly underpaid. That is just the reality of it. The way internal compensation structures work, if you've been getting the average raise that a loyal employee who has stayed with the company, stayed loyal to the job, stayed loyal to, whatever, and just been getting the average raises, the market has far surpassed you. And I can absolutely see where suddenly pay transparency and you go, wait, what? That position pays this? I've been here for 10, 12 years and I'm in that position and I'm making half or three quarters of what is somewhat in the middle of the range on this thing. I can completely legitimately see where people would go, I'm pretty ticked off about this. I'm pretty upset about this. And I feel like the company needs to do something about this. And I can see people going to their organizations in droves saying, what the heck? What the heck? And in many ways, I think companies have a responsibility to do something about this. And I honestly don't fault people who have said, if you've gone through the appropriate channels, and said, hey, I've been here, I've been a loyal employee, all this, and I'm seeing now this is what this range is for this job. I'm nowhere near this range because I've been here and just been getting the average 2% raise or whatever that you've been giving over the last whatever years. Like, I have fallen vastly behind. What are you going to do to help catch me up with this? And if not, then I'm going to need to explore other employment opportunities because I'm struggling to put groceries on my table. And you're over here going, well, we pay anybody else twice what you make. But since you've been here, I completely understand that. And I don't fault employees for saying, hey, I got to watch out for myself here. And clearly this company loyalty has not been reciprocated back to me. So I understand that from the employee side. At the same time, I also understand the very complicated situation that employers are in right now, where there has not been transparency. Many people do not understand the complexity of compensation structures and how it works. And they've been forced into this situation now where all this information has just been thrust out into the public sphere. And really, there's nothing they can do about it. Stack on top of that, just from being a leader, just from dealing with the HR space. Most people are not objective. And if you're an employee, this might sting a little bit, but I had to do this with myself as well. Most people are not objective about their actual value from a compensation standpoint. So the average person thinks they're the rock star, thinks they should be on the top end of the pay scale, thinks like a lot of people think that way. And so obviously, when a pay range is shared, which shows the bottom end of the range to the very tippy top, which by the way, if you're on the tippy top, it basically means you hit the top, you don't get paid anymore. And I've seen this in organizations where people hit the ceiling and then like every year it's like, well, you don't get a raise. Like the only way you get a raise is to move into a different position that's at a higher grade level because you've hit the ceiling. We don't go outside the range for this. So it's one of these things, because people don't understand how these ranges work, it can be easy to, now you see this job posting online and you go, well, I'm in that role, I make this much, this range goes all the way up here, I should be on this high end of the range. And maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should be right in the middle of the tier because, again, maybe you're a great worker, maybe you do a good job, but ultimately you're not blowing it out of the water, and also your circumstances are not there. Now, the other thing people don't also consider is these ranges are very broad because it is very difficult, and I've seen this, where it's not fair, and I understand it, but people who have moved around to different companies are not where the people who have stayed in one company are. And so now this company is trying to hire from the outside. This person over here is coming into this role, and this person goes, why would I take a salary of that when I'm already making that now? I'm not going to take a pay cut to come work for you. And so these ranges have to account for some of this stuff. So I understand the complicated situation companies are in, and I think it's unfortunate that all this stuff just kind of got thrust out there, and it's hasn't been fun for anybody. So I actually empathize with both sides of it and go, yeah, this is really messy. At the same time, I really do. Here's my advice on both parties. If you're an employee and you have discovered through whatever, whether it's through this pay transparency stuff, maybe you started talking with some of your peers, maybe you somehow, did a little more research into what roles are. I mean, at this point, you don't even necessarily have to see a job rec. You can go to Glassdoor and see pay ranges on different roles, and you might do a little, maybe you've somebody who's done a little research and gone, wait a minute, that's what we pay for this here? Like, hold the phone, because maybe you've been around the block for a while in the same company and you've been that loyal employee and now you're feeling a little bent. I think the best advice that I would give to folks in those situations is, one, have that conversation with your boss. Go have that conversation and talk with them. Let them know where you're at. Talk about, your desires and your aspirations and why, you feel that, hey, if this is, because there's one thing just to go to your boss and go, I want to raise because I'm not making enough money. It's another thing to go to your boss and say, hey, I've done some research, and based on this really is the pay range for this role. I've been doing this, and my experience and qualifications place me in here. My performance supports this. Given that, it seems a little unreasonable that my compensation would be, here. Seems more like it should be aligned to this. And managers, in my opinion, if it's a good employee, somebody you value and see worth in, you should be having that conversation with your HR compensation leaders and saying, hey, this person needs to be caught up. Like we need to do something about it. Now, employees, you need to understand your company's not just going to drop you a 20, 30% raise and bring you up to this. So if you're in a situation where that's your expectation, you probably are going to need to look externally. But if it's something where you're like, I just want to see that we're making significant progress on moving me up to a more reasonable range based on the job, that's a conversation that any employee should feel comfortable having. And any company you're at that says no or blows you off, then you know what? Maybe you should go look for another job. But you need to be objective about your compensation as well. You can't just look at one high end of the range on Glassdoor or the high end of the range on a job posting and go, I should be making that, because that's just not reasonable. So you need to have realistic expectations going into it. But to the companies, hey, if the market is adjusted and you've been taking advantage of people who have been loyal and have just been taking the cost of living raises for X number of years and have fallen grossly behind in compensation at a time when inflation is at its highest, shame on you. And you should be doing things to catch those people up and focusing on how do you grow them and keep them competitive in the market. Because if you're not, you are exploiting people's skills and talents, and that's not cool. And if the blowback that you're receiving as a senior leader on this is legitimate because you have been exploiting and taking advantage of people who have been loyal to your company, not cool. Not cool at all. Now, if it's legitimately not the case, then be open, have conversations with your employees, and also recognize, you know what? Some of them may leave, and that's okay. It's okay for employees to say, look, I get where we are. This is where I need to be, and this doesn't work for me. And so I'm going to need to move on to something else. So that's something that is definitely, and I think we're only going to see this rise. I think there's going to need to be, but I don't think the solution is, well, I just think the solution we've created right now is oversimplistic, and it doesn't account for the nuance of compensation. I understand why compensation is not something that is usually publicly shared, because most people don't actually have the understanding of how complex it is. And that's not me just defending secrecy about it. I think there just needs to be ethics, and it needs to be governed in a really healthy way that has people's best interests in mind, not exploiting people and hoping you can keep them. And I've seen it over the years. I've seen the leaders and the companies that have said, hey, if we can just keep people around, we don't have to pay them as much as we do. And then they get curb stomped when stuff like this happens and all their people flee and they can't bring anybody in. And because they haven't been planning for it, here they've been budgeting based on this when really the market should have them there. So it will catch up with you. And that's what seems to be happening right now. All right. Moving on. Want to talk about, so I've been talking about Deathbots, Ghostbots a lot recently because there has been an exponential rise in these things. They are, man, I might only get to 3 of my things today. We'll see. There's been this exponential rise in Ghostbots and Deathbots, which, like I said, it doesn't surprise me one bit. We do not like dealing with grief. We are not good at supporting other people through grief. We have this American maverick, John Wayne attitude of, I just pick myself up. I don't mourn. I don't grieve. I just move on with my life. And it's not healthy. It's not good for anyone. But because that is the culture and the world we live in right now, I am not surprised that we're seeing this exponential rocket rise of people using generative AI and AI technology to digitally clone deceased loved ones and use it for different things, you know, to help them move through the, well, or hypothetically deal with the grief of the loss of a loved one. I have a huge degree of empathy for people in this. Having spent so much of my life around death and that business, I know how hard it is to lose a loved one, and I've experienced it firsthand. So I understand why people would look to this. And unfortunately, because of our consumeristic mindset, it's an opportunity. And whenever there's opportunity, people are going to create a product. And so the reality that people grieving are now suddenly going to be presented with this, hey, do you maybe want the grieving process to be a little easier? Why don't we create an AI version of your dead loved one that you can, you know, and there's a whole scale of these things. On the one end of the scale, it's something as simple as we can replicate someone's voice and then have it do something, which I personally go, I don't know that I would do it, but I can see where that might be. Maybe you have a letter from a lost loved one and you go, man, wouldn't it be really great to like actually hear this letter that I have from them spoken in their voice? Okay, I can maybe see where that could be helpful, and I can understand why that would be something that could be meaningful. But I think that's on the low scale of where this is today, which is relatively simple. I could do this myself with the software I have on my computer, where I could take 8 seconds of somebody's voice, create a clone of it, and then type up whatever I wanted it to say. So copy and paste a letter and do so. Hey, there you go. Maybe it's a business opportunity for me. Not really. I don't think I would ever. No, I would not ever go down this path. But the bottom line is that's a very simple version of it. Very simple. I can see where people go, hey, this is kind of cool. Like I could see doing this. Layer on the next level. Well, now maybe it's not just their voice. Maybe now it's also a video of them. Now I can see them, type of a thing. Again, to me, these are the less threatening versions of it where you go, I don't know that I would advocate for it or see a lot of value in it, but I can see where somebody might, and I can see where it's somewhat harmless in that maybe you're taking something that that person legitimately did and now, layering on the AI on it, type of thing. But where this is going is like, it's moving towards this. Well, now it's this interactive deathbot, chatbot, where it's not just like you're listening to it, you're interacting with it. You're actually having a conversation. And to me, this is like, well, now this gets into like, it's not even really the person anymore and all this other stuff. So I've been talking about this and I'm going to continue watching this because this one in particular has a lot of implications, and where it's going is going to go in some really, really wonky areas, to say the least. That's my prediction on this. I think we've only seen the beginning of this because of how much we hate dealing with grief and struggle, and we don't want to deal with any of this stuff. So I'm going to be watching this closely. But one of the things that I brought up last week and over the past couple of weeks is I'm actually really curious what the research says on this, because I can have a point of view based on my experience, based on some of the things I've seen over the years, and that I can, having studied human behavior and psychology, have a pretty good idea of where this may land. But what does the data say on this? So this last week, I spent some time digging into this, and wouldn't you know it, there are some people out there who have done some quantitative research into this to actually see what does the data say on this. And the data is pretty clear on this, and it is about right exactly where I expected it to be, which is, first of all, one, almost universally, these death bots, these grief bots, whatever, they fall short on people's expectations. Now, in some ways, I don't necessarily fault the death bot or, whatever bot. In some ways I do, because I think they're marketed the way they're positioned. It's like, hey, it's going to do all this for you. In some ways, I look at people who are grieving and going, I mean, not wanting to deal with your grief and thinking you can basically mitigate the process by superseding it with some sort of digital replication of a person that's lost. If anything, you're delaying the inevitable. And if anything, you're making it that much harder. So I can see where it falls short on expectations, where people may go, this is great. Now I'll have this. This is going to really help me through this. It's going to make it easier. And lo and behold, it doesn't make it easier on people. In fact, it falls grossly short on what they're hoping it's going to be able to accomplish. So for folks who may be thinking about this, considering it, whatever, again, I think realistic expectations on what this is and what purpose it may serve is probably, at a minimum, my guidance and wisdom for folks on this is, at a minimum, you should have really realistic and not think, well, this will help me not have to grieve, or it's going to make this process, it's going to make the pain be less severe. Like, no, it's not. It's not. Now, could it potentially, used right, be a helpful tool to supplement something? Maybe. And the research said that, like, without additional supplementation of this, it's actually, I'm going to get to it. It actually does more damage than good. So I think that's a really important takeaway, that, hey, if you're going to think about this at all, think about holistically. One, there are just some parts of the grief process you cannot escape. And this isn't just true with the death bot, grief bot thing. Everybody I've ever seen who's tried to short circuit the grief process, it blows up somewhere else, and it usually blows up far worse than had they just actually dealt with it. So the one thing is, don't think this is going to short circuit it. But I think one of the other things that was really interesting that it talked about was how it is completely unable to bear the emotional burden that comes with grief, which, no surprise, bearing a burden with a person, bearing a person's burden requires something that's conscious. And AI is not conscious. So it's going to have a very empty, hollow feel, and it's not going to be there. It's going to do what you want. And when you are burdened with grief, the last thing you need is just somebody doing whatever you think you want, because that's changing all the time, and it's so empty. It doesn't actually meet you where you are. And of course, a deathbot can't do that. It's physically incapable of feeling emotion and for being intimate with a person. So, does it surprise me that the research supports? Yeah, guess what? An AI deathbot can't bear your emotional burden. It is not going to offer any sort of emotional support for you whatsoever. Surprise, surprise. So, again, expectations. If you're thinking that this is what you're going to get out of it, which it's a natural tendency, you're grieving, you're struggling. And in general, this is to all the people who aren't grieving. We tend to suck at being supportive of other people. I saw this in funerals all the time. People come, oh, I'll pray for you. I'll be there for you. Then the second the meal is done after the funeral, it's like, poof. And that is the loneliest time for people, are those weeks and months after things. It's like, oh, it's all fine. You're busy. You're distracted with planning the funeral, planning all these other things. You're doing all right. Everybody's there. They're bringing you food. They're doing all this stuff. Then whoosh, it's over. Boom. Everybody's gone. And we as a species suck pretty radically at being there and actually supporting people. So this can be an opportunity area if you're watching and listening to this going, hey, what can I do to help people not fall victim to some of this stuff? How about be really emotionally supportive and actually lean into it? I get it's uncomfortable when somebody's grieving. I get it's really awkward. And sometimes you just don't know what to say. And guess what? Sometimes just shut your mouth and be there for people. Just shut your mouth and be there for them and give them a hug. Let them know you're thinking about them. Sometimes it's the simple things that actually carry people through. But I think that's the kind of emotional support that people need, not a chat bot where they can go listen to their dead dad tell them things that they never got to hear because they didn't have a relationship with them. The other thing that came out of digging into some of the research on this was the consistent and high level, high risk for emotional dependency, which again does not surprise me one bit, that often, especially these interactive grief bots. So I think there's a lower risk on this one if, like I said, you have a letter from your parent or whatever, your spouse, something like that. And now you've created an AI version of the voice that then reads this letter to you, and it brings you comfort and it helps you through, when you're really missing them, to be able to just hear their voice and be able to kind of process. To me, relatively low risk. I mean, again, I think the opportunity for it to fall short is still significant, but that to me is very different than I've created now a digital version of your dead loved one that you're talking to. You're asking for wisdom. You're asking for and it's not really them. Like, to me, that one, red flags all over it in terms of emotional dependency. Now, I didn't have a ton of time to sit and scour through all of the research data and how exactly they did this. So I'm actually really curious to dig more into on that sliding scale of this. Where does this stuff fall and how far are they going with it when they see, like, where does emotional dependency really escalate in terms of risk? But if nothing else, all of this stuff should at least put this on people's caution radar and go, this is a new thing that's popping up and it's meeting a perceived need. But just because we can do something doesn't necessarily mean it's a wise choice for us to pursue this path. And if nothing else, hey, folks, we can do so much better to support people through tough times. We honestly, some of the things I see are just heartbreaking. Growing up and even today, we do not do a good job of being there for people who are struggling. We just want to help get it over with, get them through it. And I get it. It's awkward. It's weird. It's uncomfortable. But that's what people need. And that's the only way they can healthily move through this stuff. So I think for anybody out there who may be considering this stuff, I hope you just at least, think twice, think carefully, have realistic expectations, be very careful how you proceed. Make sure these other areas are covered, because that was one thing that was consistent in the research, is that by itself, far more damage than good. So make sure you've got some of these other areas covered. And the last thing that I'll just say on this is, having spent so much time around death, don't take it for granted. You only have so much time here. And it's so easy to get wrapped up with all the things in life that you fail to actually slow down and appreciate the things that really matter until it's too late. And if there's one thing that you will not avoid, regardless of what all the tech headlines say, and we'll talk about that one in an upcoming episode, regardless of what all the tech headlines say, you are not avoiding this. It's coming for you. So, are you doing everything you can to be prepared for it? And there's no coming back. So, with that, I hope you have a wonderful week, a wonderful Easter if you're celebrating. And yeah, I will see you on the other side.